My name is Anthony Weeks, and this is my Capstone research video presentation on how sports provide positive developmental effects for at risk youth. The benefits of youth participating in sport are well known for its manner of being able to implement several positive developmental outcomes. Through sport participation, youth are more likely to experience beneficial growth relating to physical health, advanced academic performance, and more positive social well being, psychological health, among several other health behaviors. As a youth development professional, I'm responsible for providing recreational activities for youth in our care. I currently work for the Department of Youth Services, where we have legal guardianship of youth offenders between the ages of 13 and 17. As a former athlete and someone who has a passion for sports, I was elected as the staff member to administer sports programs for these youth. When I began researching this topic, I found that there was not a lot of information on the specific population. There was an abundance of information on positive youth development through sports, but the youth examined were either in academic or recreation settings. There is some literature on how sports can act as a preventative measure for at risk behavior, but very little research was previously conducted on the definitive impact sports can have on at risk youth as it pertains to positive youth development. As I was conducting my research, I began thinking about the skills I derived from playing sports growing up, this including time management, emotional regulation, building relationships, and dealing with adversity, just to name a few. These are all aspects of everyday life that this particular youth struggle with when they are in the community. Most of them come from broken homes, are involved in gang activity, or take part in acts that most would consider delinquent. So I thought it would be a great idea to organize somewhat formal games for the youth to participate in and see if they were able to acknowledge some of the different skills required to be successful in sports and if those skills could be transferred to their everyday lives. Initially, I was going to conduct brief interviews, but later felt that it would feel too formal, especially in a specific setting, and would be more time consuming. The purpose of this study was to explore and provide a better understanding of the function of youth sports participation and its effects of promoting positive developmental benefits as it relates to at risk youth. The study aimed to identify several positive youth development outcomes and examine whether youth sports programs should be implemented as part of treatment plans for at risk youth. In the following analysis, 15 adolescents currently under guardianship were observed and then given athlete behavioral questionnaire scales after participating and competing in sports. The prediction was that increased participation in sports would have a significant positive impact and provide at risk youth with increased developmental benefits. The assumption was also made that at risk youth participation in sports can be used as preventative and rehabilitative options for such youth. The idea was to gather thoughts after competing, that way their experiences were fresh in their mind. So I had the 15 youth play one basketball game consisting of 4 quarters and one two-hand touch football game with a brief intermission between games, and afterwards administer the athlete behavior questionnaire. This questionnaire was used as part of a toolkit which measures positive youth development in sports, but the previous study used it in a school setting. The athlete behavior scale has 20 behaviors and asked the participants to indicate how often they displayed each given behavior. Each behavior is placed on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being lowest as never displayed, and 5 being the highest as very often displayed. The behaviors are not performance-based but are related to their interactions with other participants, such as did they encourage a teammate, did they help an opponent when they were injured, did they intentionally foul someone, basically behaviors that would suggest positive or negative development. After completing observations and reviewing participant responses, research found that sports did indeed provide positive developmental outcomes and were compelling enough to productively change the lifestyles of at-risk youth if implemented with the proper style. The most interesting trend I noticed in their responses were behaviors that purposely went against the norms of sports participation. Specific behaviors such as did they intentionally violate the rules of the game? Did they intentionally foul an opponent? Did they retaliate after a bad foul was committed? All of the participants answered never to these behaviors. Given this specific population's history with defying authority and rules, I expected at least a few participants to indicate that they did in fact behave this way at some point, but that was not the case. I also did not observe any participants appear to display these behaviors as well, so that at least confirms that their responses were genuine. More importantly, I think it is a good sign that the youth were able to recognize when they were constructively engaged with others and when they were not. These moments can be used as teaching points for coaches or authority figures in these settings for examples of how or how not to conduct themselves. If these youth are able to control their behavior in high stress situations like sports, then they should be able to apply these same tactics to everyday life. Professionals working with at risk youth can apply what was learned in this study to their positive development tools and should notice a positive change in how the youth conduct themselves.